So about 4 days ago, I posted a video saying that I closed half of my liquidity pools, and I did, and I talked about exactly why I did so. And then today, and yesterday, of course, the market started to go absolutely crazy. Ethereum's now at $23.50. Bitcoin's sitting at $103,000, just down a little bit from an all-time high. Solana's sitting at $171. So today I want to show you the performance of not being in liquidity pools and show you the difference that it actually has when implementing recovery strategies into your portfolio. Now here's the thing, it's not too late to implement recovery strategies into your portfolio. It's not nearly as good of a time as it was, just 5-6 days ago, but it's also not too late. And you're now at a point in time where you need to implement recovery strategies if you haven't already. Sitting out of range in your pools waiting for them to go back in range is not going to cut it. And the simple reason why is because in the crypto to crypto pools, there is going to be divergence from Ethereum to Solana. For example, if we look at the 180-day chart for wrapped Bitcoin Ethereum, which is showing how many Ethereums equal one wrapped Bitcoin, you can see even though Bitcoin's back at an all-time high, Ethereum is still very, very far off. So if you entered over here, guess what? You're still far, far, far out of range. That's because you're no longer looking at dollar prices. You're looking at actual pool prices. Anyways, first things first, I'm going to show you the performance from the pools that didn't need recovery strategies. The first one right here is going to be Ethereum to Edge. This one has been holding up very, very nice. A 91% APR, $765 in earnings so far, and $687 profit versus HODL, meaning that the majority of my earnings are profit, and I don't really have that much divergence loss other than about $80 or so. Additionally, I have a lot of price profit, about $1,100 right now. And this position, I actually started with a total of $10,000. So to have nearly $10,000 or so, it's awesome. And if we look at total positions, you'll see that I'm still down about 1156. Now again, my goal is to wait for Edge to go back to its initial entry price while being correlated with Ethereum. That way I will have my $10,000, but I will also have all the earnings that I've accumulated during that time, which is over $1,000 and would put me at well over a 10% profit during that time. So this one didn't really need any advanced recovery strategies. It just needed to keep doing what it's doing and keep beating divergence loss and being correlated to each other, because that just allows me to ride the wave up and of course generate fees all the way on the way up. Simple as that. So taking a look at Soul Render, my first position lost $2,800. My second position lost $650. But then my third position, that was a much broader range and no longer focusing on the short term, but rather just doing a broad range, focusing on the long term, lasted 2 months as opposed to 18 days and 3 days, and it profited $4,300. Now on top of that, I have the position that I'm currently in as well, which is up another $4,200, and it is beating divergence loss by a long shot. It has $450 in earnings and about $445 profit versus HODL, which means our divergence loss is less than $5 right there. So that's a 17% ROI on this position itself. It just goes to show that sometimes when you're focusing on the long term, you're going to get great results and you don't even have to monitor these pools. I just let this thing do its thing. I have not touched this since I entered it. And I'm actually at a point where I could start to take profit on this pretty soon, at least from the fees, because it's doing very, very well and I'm happy with the results so far. Now, one of the positions that I did close as well that I haven't opened back up is an AI16Z Sol position that is market neutral, so actually hedging out the exposure. You can see this one had great results from an asset accumulation standpoint, but what this doesn't show you is that I actually lost $3,500 on my hedge, which means reality is profit was about $1,300. But that's fine. And the reason why is because on the downside, if price went down and this LP essentially lost money instead, so roles were reversed, guess what? My hedge would have made a profit and kind of outweighed that loss right there, and I would have been able to just simply print the earnings. And I haven't entered into that one yet because I've been waiting for the market to cool off, get back to kind of some point of stability, and then I'm going to enter in with more capital this time, about double the amount that I was doing. And then what you guys have all been waiting for, by far the worst performing one, is going to be this Ethereum to Tau. And this is the one that really needed a recovery strategy in place. And before I dive in here, guys, if you want to stay updated with what I'm personally doing in my portfolio, make sure to drop a like and subscribe notifications turned on. And I've also made a resource that typically we would keep private available to the public. We took one of the calls that we had with our DeFi legacy members, specifically relating to just rescuing your DeFi portfolio and turning underwater positions into profitable opportunities. It's now public. We're just taking this one call. We're not doing all of them. We're taking this one and we've made it available for $27, right? And the reason why we attach a price tag to it is because we are running a business and we take that money and we throw it back into infrastructure, building out tools like Metrics Finance, running our free community that anybody can join. By the way, the link's right below this video. And of course, paying retain our team. But also we wanted to make sure that the barrier to entry was very, very low for this one, simply due to the fact that we don't want there to be a situation where we could have helped people rescue their DeFi portfolio, but we didn't because we wanted to get them into our program. If you guys need implementation support, that's where we can help you in our program. And that takes a lot of our time, so we charge a much higher amount for it. But if you guys are just kind of looking for some guidance and to see if you can do it yourself, this is a great option to go for just 27 bucks. But let me show you the results because they speak for themselves here, guys. So this Ethereum to Tau position, I started all the way back in March, and I started with total capital of $30,681. Now, basically what ended up happening is I generated earnings throughout multiple positions, a total of $3,100 so far. So obviously those earnings have been compounded. And when compounding those earnings, what I also did is I actually took a little bit from my Tau stash. So my actual deposits is $31,000, okay? And then with the compounded earnings, we add those, so the $3,100 to the $31,000 to give us a total deposit of $34,100. So those are two numbers. Our break even is $31,000. That's just saying, hey, we're not going to have our earnings back, but guess what? We have our initial capital back, 31 grand. And then if we want to have our initial capital plus all the earnings during that period, we need 34.1K basically. Now here's the thing, this position started off decent, right? $224 in earnings, $130 profit versus HODL, and it was a slight loss. And it was only doing a 55% APR. There's solid assets that I believe in, so I wasn't as worried about the APR. Next position comes along, $1,051 in earnings, down $9,700, but $675 profit versus HODL. So this one was kind of similar situation to Edge at that point in time. Edge was down like actually 50%, but guess what? Still profiting versus HODL. So we were just going to hold it on the way back up, let it do its thing with the 63% APR, because assets will go down and assets will go up. But we were close to going out of range, so we rebalanced. This next position lost $367, but was down $1,244 compared to HODLing the market. Pretty bad. And it had $1,200 in earnings, the most that we've had in a position. So already off the bat, that's telling me, hey, I might need to find a different strategy, or I might need to implement a contingency strategy in place. This was doing a 200% APR because of super high volatility and trading volume. But again, that was not outweighing the divergence loss that I had. And then over here, Ethereum to Tau, right? This profited $3,700. And of course, it was down $400 compared to HODLing, and it had $600 in earnings, 83% APR. So again, what the result was going to be is if I continued to hold on the way up, I would be at my initial entry prices and I would have a significant loss. So let's dive into this final position and talk about what I did and the results of it. So $21,400 in deposits roughly. So let's throw that in Metrics Finance, right? I also threw in the initial entry prices for this single position, not the actual assets themselves. So Tau, our initial entry price was $375, which is plus 50%. Ethereum, our initial entry price was $24.75, so plus 58%. Now here's the thing, if these things went up to their initial entry price, we'd have $32,938. We wouldn't have much divergence loss whatsoever. Arguably, this would have been a very, very good position. It puts me above a break even for my initial assets, but at the same exact time, it puts me very, very close to a break even when I look at my total deposits, including all compounded earnings. And I would have created more earnings on the way up, which would have helped outweigh any of that divergence loss. So that would have been a great scenario, but it didn't play out that way because at the time of exiting this, right, number one, I was bouncing in and out of range. But the reason why I was bouncing in and out of range is because Ethereum had only appreciated 9.8%, whereas Tau had appreciated 35%. So more divergence was created. That's what kicked me out of range. And I was left with the dilemma on if I should rebalance, lock in a bunch of divergence loss, continue to try to ride this up and still have a bunch of divergence loss, or take the opportunity at hand, which was contingency strategies. So just for reference, I had $24,497 at the time of exit. And we could have rebalanced, but ultimately the dilemma that we're faced with is what happens if Tau does not go past the initial entry price? What happens if it does not go far past that? Because we're having to let Tau go way beyond where we initially entered, not to mention we're having to bet on the fact that it's going to be correlated with Ethereum, which it has not been. And even in that situation, we only come out to $31,000. So what do we do? Well, what I did is I took all the money from the liquidity pool here, which was basically $24,500. I did not take the earnings. I left those all in Tau so I can have some HODL exposure to Tau. So about $24,500. I shifted it into 13.85 Ethereum. Simple as that. But then I borrowed $5,000 in USDC against that over on Aave. and I shifted that into Ethereum as well. So I have 16.78 exposure to Ethereum. That essentially gave me about 1.2x leverage or so on Ethereum. So I have a little bit more leverage, and I can essentially reduce my break-even price. Because remember, my break-even price for Ethereum was $24.75. Well, over at $24.75 with my now 16.78 Ethereum, I have $41,530. And if we subtract my borrow of $5,000, I will have $36,530. Means at my break-even price for Ethereum, I have a $2,400 profit on my actual total deposits, not on my initial deposits, on my actual total deposits, which means I keep all my earnings and more, which is significantly better than what I would get strictly in the liquidity pool. And I was assuming that there's going to be some volatility soon and the market was going to pick back up, which is why I executed on this strategy. Now, here's the thing. As I said, it reduced my break-even price, which means if we went to 23.25 or so, right, I'd have 39,000, and then we would subtract my $5,000 borrow, I would have 34,000 roughly. So my break-even price was roughly 23.25, maybe 23.35 or so, right? Instead of 24.75, because I implemented this contingency strategy. I turned all that divergence loss into an opportunity, which puts me at a significantly better position, literally plus $5,000 compared to if I just held in the liquidity pool or continue to do the liquidity pool strategy. Thing is, there was already so much divergence loss across the positions that we had to do something, basically. We couldn't just rebalance and hope for the best or wait for it to go back up because that divergence loss already occurred and was locked in. Now, the beauty of this is if we wanted to look at just the initial capital that I put in, right, Ethereum would really only have to go to 2150 or so. And just like that, I would have the initial capital that I put in, which was 31 grand. So from 24.75, my break-even price being my initial entry, all the way down to 2150 if I wanted to just extract the capital that I put in. Simple as that. And I knew that that was very, 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 very possible. And I did this when Ethereum was at roughly 17.15 or so. So I got this comment here the other day that says you closed your pools a few days ago. Now the markets are back up. Probably went back into ranges. Lesson learned, just hold your positions because they will come back. Well, as you can see, this obviously outperformed just holding your positions and doing nothing. The reason why is because, of course, I turned the divergence loss into an opportunity. And I will be the first to admit, liquidity pools is not always the best strategy. Truth be told, liquidity pools do better in periods of low volatility because there is low volatility. You're not going to have a lot of divergence loss, but there's going to be consistent fees generated because people are still trading no matter what. So that's why in our portfolios, we use both liquidity pools and, of course, other strategies like lending, leverage lending, counterparty vaults, and many, many others, basically. So I hope you guys learned something from today's video. If you did, drop a like, subscribe, notifications turned on. Remember, this is just one of the contingency strategies. If you want to pick up our full blueprint, there's going to be a call recording right below this that you can pick up for 27 bucks. Not completely okay. Remember, we just do this so we can inject more money into our software, building out great tools. Anyways, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.